Welcome everybody, this is Nancy at Paper Moon Tarot, and I am here to do a VR to Kasia at Tarot Map and Patrick at Living Wheel on formative tarot decks, and my cat McFeagle just decided to help out. So here you go, McFeagle, move along. Okay, he's really good at this. So anyway, there were no specific prompts in the VR challenge, but just to discuss the decks that formed your tarot practice that you encountered along the way. So I kind of went back to the earliest decks, and I'm talking almost exactly 2 years ago, so it's not a long time ago. But the first decks I started to acquire, and the first one was at a little metaphysical shop in my town. I was kind of bored, I think it was May a couple of years ago, and trying to figure out what to do with my time, wanting to learn something new, and I came across their tarot decks. I'd wandered in their shop before, but I'd never really noticed that they had tarot decks, mainly mass-produced ones, not any independent ones, but a pretty good selection. So I went through and I chose Tarot Made Easy. I remember I was looking at Shadowscapes too, but the woman next to me was looking at Shadowscapes, and I thought, well, I don't want to get the same one she's getting. Don't ask me why we think that way. So I got this. Part of it was I just want to learn the system of tarot. So I thought, well, this one sounds more like it's going to teach me something. And I think in the end it was a good choice because it's Barbara Moore, and the book that came with it was a very well-written book. She's a good writer and good for people new to tarot. Now the deck is very RWS, but it's not the original Pamela Colden Smith art by any means. These are the backs. This is the art, which is kind of fun and you know, very true to Two of Pentacles there. And you know, true to the RWS aesthetic and system, but obviously the art is modified. And it was a good one to get if I wanted to learn RWS in a very straightforward way with pretty much all the symbolism there. After a very short time, though, the art was really kind of boring to me. It wasn't, I don't know, it was a little children's book illustration-y, not that interesting, except as I was studying all the symbols and that kind of thing. But it was kind of like the Knight on a Horse in a children's book feel to it. So so Tarot Made Easy, and I'm not really sure if this is a deck that's sold separately or was done for this. Maybe you guys know. But anyway, I used that for a while, not that long before I started to look for other decks. I went back to the store and I got online and I was like, there's a lot of decks out here. So this was a great little beginning for a few months, but I quickly moved on to want to acquire decks. So probably one of the next ones that I acquired that just taught me there's some variety out there. You know, there's not just strict RWS, but things that are a little in their own artistic direction, let's put it that way, was the Secret Tarot, Lo Scarabeo, and the art on this is very nice. The backs basically are lovers, but pretty. But there was a little more of an edge to the art for me than the Tarot Made Easy deck. But not a huge departure by any means. And again, kind of the flimsy cardstock that Llewellyn and Los Garabeo can have. But I like the art better. I mean, I think this is prettier art than anything in Tarot Made Easy. So it moved me along a little bit and said, well, there's other stuff to explore. There wasn't a radical departure at this point. Although some of the cards, like that one, I think was more interesting, more dark and atmospheric than the Tarot Made Easy was. So, the Secret Tarot was probably one of the ones that followed on very quickly from Tarot Made Easy. So one of the next ones I got was a tarot in a tin from Amazon, and that was the Zillich Tarot. Still one of my favorites. And this one, it's a Thoth-based deck, so it kind of confused me at that point. It was too early on to really get into that. Pretty backs. And very much a deck that turned me on to the fact that the art could go in a lot of different directions for tarot decks. Very pretty art. I really like, I mean, I went from the Made Easy was like, well, I'm not really turned on by this art, to this Secret Tarot where I was like, there's some nice cards in here. I kind of like some of the cards, to this that was kind of like, wow, okay, I really like this art. I would like to frame some of this art in my house, you know. But as far as my journey learning tarot, the Zillich Tarot was just something to flip through and enjoy. And as I tried to memorize keywords by which card it was, I would use this, but it wasn't that helpful to help me learn about each card. But it was helpful in terms of my starting to appreciate tarot art. And I think I've learned how to read to some degree that you can in 2 years, which is not a great deal. But I've also become something of a collector, and this deck was key in that part of the journey. So that's the Zillich Tarot. Now, about that time, after I'd acquired several decks and started to realize the art could differ, I looked into getting an independent deck. And my first independent deck was the Anima Mundi. Just saw it online, don't remember how I found it, just trolling around, and got this deck, which did a few things for me. It introduced me to independent decks, which is a huge door opening. It also introduced me to nicer cardstock than Llewellyn, and obviously a different artistic aesthetic that drifted further away from your traditional tarot. It's an animal deck, and that's not something I'd had before. But it's also a pip deck. So I enjoyed looking at this, but again, because I was early in my journey, a pip deck wasn't giving me enough clues that I find the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith imagery gives you. So it was pretty, and I could connect this better than the Zillich Tarot with the meaning of the cards. But because it was an animal deck and a pip deck, it was like, okay, that's not getting me much further, but now I know there's art that isn't strictly RWS, and then there's cardstock that's better, and it's matte instead of glossy, and so there were a lot of things this deck did in terms of opening my eyes. But I always had to kind of figure out, okay, 4 of Pentacles, I'm reading keywords like greed and so forth, and I guess you could say this little guy's hugging that one, I guess that's greedy. You know, but I always had to sort of interpret it like you do when you're learning to play piano and you're saying, okay, this scale and this scale, this is 2 down from this scale, or you're learning a language and you're saying, well, that word means that word. You're always translating in your head. And so this kind of deck at that point made me try to reach for the meaning in the card instead of the card giving me the meaning. And at some point you flip, and that's okay. But at this point in my journey, and then I think it was around then that I got my first Marseille deck, which, to add to the confusion, I'm into a pip deck, an animal deck, but I just loved exploring the art. So rather than sticking with one, McFeagle, my cat, rather than sticking with one RWS based to learn the system, trying to move glasses and everything he can break away from McFeagle, sorry. I went off exploring the art. It kind of confused me in my learning journey, but the Maria Celia, a tinned Marseille deck, is the next one that I got. My first Marseille. Very pretty deck. I really like this deck. Pretty backs. I still love this deck. The colors are so beautiful. It's a lovely little Marseille deck. There's the back. Very pretty. And again, you know, for the majors and the court cards, I could see them. For the pips, I couldn't. But I love the art. I love the colors. And I'm sure around then I started to at least research briefly, what's a Marseille deck? What is that? And didn't go far with that either. Again, I was off on an art venture rather than a learning the cards venture. But at some point in this process, it all started to come together and I realized, okay, Marseille is this, and RWS is this, and variations on RWS in terms of art, I can start to accommodate because I've started to learn the basic meanings. We've all been through this process and we all do it better or worse than others. But as I say, I kind of veered from the study to the art early, and so had to come back around, kind of drive my learning, and I went through a very confused period. But I moved on. And actually one of the decks that moved me on in a few different ways was the Deviant Moon. And the Deviant Moon moved me forward because it was continuing that adventure of art, not just pretty art, but interesting art. You know, if you've watched any of my channel, you know I really like interesting, quirky artwork. And it gives me something to figure out and think about. But I found that the meanings in these cards mapped very nicely to RWS. I had no trouble with that. And the cards were so memorable. It's pretty hard to forget these images. They helped me memorize. They helped me go through that period of learning the meanings of the cards. And the kings don't all look alike, and the queens don't all look alike. And I think that helps. When all the court cards look pretty similar, it doesn't help. But that tower is very clear to me, and it's more along Marseille lines that some sort of inspiration or knowledge hits and changes everything, rather than a lightning strike. But and the people aren't really in danger of being hurt. They don't have far to fall, but there is nothing abstract about this. It tells you what the card is, but in a very interesting and I think kind of fun way. Some people find it dark. I don't. I think these characters are fascinating. So, you know, coming across this was really important to me because it combined the fact that things could be interesting art-wise, but they could also teach me. I could also stick to the system and learn the system. And Deviant Moon was very important in my growth. Okay, so let's see what's next. Oh, what's next is over here. All right, so I went through my more traditional RWS and a little variation on that, and the artsy Zillich tarot, and my first indie deck in the Tableau Mundi, Anima Mundi, sorry, to my first Marseille deck, and then Deviant Moon, which just opened up several doors. Around that time, and I haven't written a chronology, but as I recall, around that time, I got El Goliath. That would have been my second independent deck, and from Australia, so it meant I waited a while to get this one. But El Goliath is just beautiful. Again, an animal-based deck. Again, a deck where I had to kind of figure out the meaning and connect it to the images. But they're so beautiful. The art is just amazing in this deck. Big cards. There's the backs. This is I think the original version that I've got. Keep toying with the idea of getting the second version. But look at those hippopotami. They're just so beautiful. And the artwork, the pencil detail. El Goliath was along that journey of the art can be amazing, the cardstock can be better, they can be bigger. You know, they don't have to be just one size for tarot decks. So El Goliath was also kind of formative for me. And then I think this deck was the first one I got gifted. And that was, I started around May, and at Christmas that year, my husband gave me my first deck. One that I'm sure I'd mentioned to him, and he went and got it for me as a Christmas gift. And that was the Tarot of the Golden Wheel. And it's a US Games deck, and it's got very pretty card backs. The light's changing here. And it's about Russian folktales and very pretty art. It's not my very favorite deck, except that it was my first gifted deck. And it is prettier than a lot of mass market decks, in the kind of pretty I like. I don't like the unicorns and daisies stuff. I like this pretty watercolors. So the Tarot of the Golden Wheel was my first gifted deck, and so it holds a place in my heart. And also reads pretty true to the RWS, so it and several other decks I got along the way at this point helped me with that, with my education. Now, I will say that I did not get an actual traditional RWS Pamela Coleman Smith art deck until maybe about 3 or 4 months ago, because I just finally said to myself, you know, I was watching people showing multiple versions of the RWS and saying to myself, you know, I don't actually have one of those. I'd almost memorized the cards by watching people on YouTube show their decks of various types. And I thought, you know, I should have one. The art isn't my favorite art. It's well done. I really appreciate Pamela Coleman Smith's art. I bought the book, you know, the hardcover book on Pamela Coleman Smith, and admire her life, but it's the Pamela Coleman Smith version of the art isn't my favorite art. But I did get one, Radiant-wise, a few months ago, because I thought I really have to have one of those. So that's kind of the formative decks. They're not my favorite decks. Some of them have a warm place in my heart. Some of them I pull out now and then, and some of them I hardly ever look at. The Tarot Made Easy, I haven't pulled out for probably almost 2 years. You know, it was a couple of months into my journey that I probably stopped using that and went on to other art and other decks. But I appreciate every one of these decks for helping me learn and helping me grow in terms of my appreciation of the whole tarot deck world, which is not just the meanings of the cards, but it's also the artwork, the energy that people put into them, what they're sharing in terms of these decks. What we share is so fun and informative and intuitive. So that's my response to the Formative Decks challenge. And thanks to Kasia and Patrick for the challenge. And I'd love to hear your comments below on your formative decks. And you all take care. And I wish you a sunny day, because you can tell here it's really dim and dark, and I turn on every light. Take care. Bye.